The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking for a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, over 25 podcast platforms. Check the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author and world-renowned publicist out of New York City. He's just a wonderful gentleman to chat with, and he's got a new book called Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me. He'll tell you more about it. He also wrote a number of books too, like The God Problem, The Muhammad Code, How I Accidentally Started the 60s, My Dinner with Howard, and more. And of course, he's published and given lectures at conferences in 12 different fields: quantum physics, cosmology, and evolutionary biology, neuroscience, infoscience, aerospace, you name it, he's done it, and helps sustain build careers of Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, Billy Joel, and more. And live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studios in New York City, ladies and gentlemen, the author and world-renowned publicist, the very multi-talented Howard Bloom. Howard, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Mike, it's good to see you.
Oh, good to see you as well, too. And, of course, you're an author, world-renowned publicist. You got a book called Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, which is available on Amazon. You also published quite a few books, The God Problem, Muhammad Code, How I Accidentally Started the 60s, My Dinner with Howard, and more. We're having dinner right now as we speak, too. So we got all that. And, of course, you've published, given lectures in conferences in 12 fields and more. And before we get into all that, tell us how you first got started.
Well, I really got started at the age of 10, which sounds ridiculous. But I was a lost kid in Buffalo, New York. My parents had no time for me and weren't the least bit interested. And other kids hated me. They used me as a target. They grabbed my hat. They tossed it back and forth between them. They chased me around the block. They threatened to beat me up. I mean, it wasn't a pleasant childhood. And one day a book appeared in my lap, and it said the first two laws of science are these. Number one, the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo, and it told the story all wrong. It said Galileo had been willing to go to the stake to defend his truth. And rule of science number two, look at things run under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. And it gave the example of Anton von Leeuwenhoek, who invented the microscope and discovered that we shared this planet with a whole world of creatures we had never seen before because they were too small for us to see. So all of a sudden I had a creed, I had a religion, those two rules of science. And then at the age of 12, I discovered I was an atheist, and I put off recognizing that until my bar mitzvah was over, because my bar mitzvah was going to represent the first party in Buffalo, New York I'd actually been invited to, and presents, lots and lots of presents. So I spent 2 months writing thank you notes for the presents, and when I was finished with that, I was able to confess I was an atheist, but that was the end of August. In the beginning of September, something in the Jewish calendar comes up that's considered extremely important, the high holidays. So my parents managed to dress me in a suit, put me in their blue four-door Fraser, get me all the way to Richmond Avenue where the synagogue was. And at that point, since I'm an atheist and wasn't the least bit interested in going to the services, I rebelled. I refused to go any farther. So my parents were literally trying to drag me by the ankles out of the car, and I was holding on to the car door frame, and I had a sudden realization. If there are no gods in the heavens and there are no gods under the earth, are there gods? Yes, there are gods inside my parents. Those gods are the incredible passion with which my parents are willing to take their firstborn child and drag him up the street like a sack of meat, grinding his face to a pudding on the pavement. And if those passions existed, if the gods existed in my parents, they existed in me. Now, Galileo changed the world by taking a device that was designed for horizontal viewing. It was a telescope. It was called a spyglass. It was to allow you to see the enemy troops coming over the horizon before the enemy troops realized you were onto them. And he had the audacity to turn this instrument up to the heavens, which was outrageous. Everybody knew what was in the heavens. It was God's underwear. Everything was perfect up there. Aristotle said circles were perfect, so it was all perfect circles. And Galileo discovered that there are these big, lumpy, rocky stones with pockmarks up there. Not at all what people had expected. And Anton von Leeuwenhoek changed everything by taking his device for horizontal viewing, also a lens. He was a draper. He used his lens to see how fine the weave was of the fabrics he was importing. And he turned that lens in an unexpected direction down on pond water and discovered microbes. And I realized my obligation was to take that lens and turn it inward and find the gods inside of us. So that was one of the quests of my life, because remember, I had started in microbiology and theoretical physics at the age of 10 and had acquired some scientific credentials by the time I was 12. Wow. So when I graduated from NYU, magna cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, all of that, I had fellowships at 4 different grad schools in neuroscience. And I had a realization. I was after the gods inside of us. I was after the ecstatic experience and how that ecstatic experience forms the forces of history. And I was going to end up in psychology doing paper and pencil tests to 22 college students in exchange for a psychology credit. And how many ecstatic experiences was I going to see in that classroom with those students filling out that form? None. Zero. I would spend the rest of my life unable to study the thing that interested me the most. So I jumped ship from my 4 fellowships and co-founded an art studio, and that gave me a periscope position from which to see a whole area of life I had never known before, popular culture. I knew nothing about it. And I ended up in 1976 founding the biggest PR firm in the music industry and working with the people that you cited and more: Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Kiss, Queen, Run DMC, Billy Joel, Billy Idol, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, ZZ Top, people, and Joan Jett. Shaka Khan, I keep forgetting her. Not.
and don't be quiz after this, guys.
So, and I found the land where the gods are. I found the land of ecstatic experiences when I got into rock and roll, because I was offered a job as a magazine editor, and nobody told me what the magazine was about. And in those days, you couldn't look things up on Google. So I went to a meeting with the publisher, having no idea what the magazine was, and it turned out to be a magazine about rock and roll. So that's how I got into rock and roll. And when I went to my first Fleetwood Mac concert at Carnegie Hall, they were a dying blues band. They didn't have Stevie Nicks yet, half an hour into, first I watched as we all sat there in the auditorium, very aware of how the people on either side of us and the people behind us might see us, and trying to look cool as can be. And then the lights went down and the band started to play on stage, and we began to melt together into this magical collective trance that we don't talk about, but is the essence of a rock and roll concert. And then a half an hour into the concert, the lights went up in the auditorium, the lights went out on the stage, the sound went out on the stage, all power had been cut to the stage, and it looked like the end of the concert, and we were beginning to become self-conscious again, conscious of how the people on either side of us and behind us were looking at us. And it looked like the magic of the concert was about to dissipate. And Mick Fleetwood, who was this tall string bean of a man, went down to the very foot of the stage, and without microphones or anything, said, fuck this, we're going to rock and roll. And he yelled. Right, and he galvanized us. He took us to an even higher level of this magical trance state that we had been in. And I suddenly realized I've lucked into the land where the gods are, completely by accident. So in Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, A Search for, the subtitle is A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll, because I was seeking that transcendent experience, that ecstatic experience, and finding it all over the place. So the book is the story of how I found my way to a technique that I called secular shamanism, to find the souls and the gods inside of my artists, and found those souls and gods inside of some of the most remarkable people of the 20th century. From Billy Joel and Billy Idol to Prince and Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like working with Michael Jackson and Prince?
It was radically different for the two of them, and it was radically different for a reason. Prince was an extremely intense workaholic. And when I first was about to start working with him, I read every single trade magazine on Monday morning, and I read every single chart. And there was this album moving up on the black charts, and I had never heard of the artist before. There was no publicity for him, and his album went platinum. Well, how in the world do you go platinum when not a single soul knows who you are? So to me, it was an astonishment. And then I got a call asking if I would be willing to work with this mystery artist, and of course the answer was yes. I regarded him as a phenomena. I wanted to know the secret of what he was all about. And I got a call from one of the publicists at Warner Bros. On the West Coast. And this is an extremely articulate Harvard-level woman. And she said, you're going to have a very hard time working with Prince. In fact, it's going to be impossible. He can't do interviews. We set up 2 interviews for him out here. and he was absolutely silent with the first interviewer, and he tried to strangle the second interviewer. So,
yes, I am not the former artist Prince.
right. So I had worked out the technique of secular shamanism by that time, and it meant that I was going to demand 6 weeks from you. First of all, if you were my client and came into my office, I gave you a speech. I said, if you want me to fashion an artificial mask for you called an image, and you want me to sit here like a guy in a plaid suit with a cigar between his fingers saying, with that artificial image, kid, I'm going to make you a star, then I'm going to send you to my best competitor. That's not for me. If you are willing to recognize that music is not an exchange of pieces of plastic, it is not an exchange of downloads, it is not an exchange of money, it is an exchange of human soul, then I will work with you. Now, what do I mean it's an exchange of human soul? You sit down at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because you're on deadline for an album and you have to write a lyric. You know you can never write a lyric. You can't even figure out how you wrote all your previous lyrics. But by 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a good day, there's a lyric in front of you. And once or twice in your life, the lyric is so perfect, it feels like it wrote itself. Then you go on stage on a really good night, and you see the eyes of the audience widen. You see their pupils dilate. You see their faces melting. You feel them come together into a common energy like a giant amoeba. And you feel that amoeba of energy reach a pseudopod out to you, and you feel the energy of anywhere from 700 to 70,000 people pouring through you. And you have an out-of-body experience. You feel you're up on the ceiling watching as all of this takes place. And that energy from the crowd goes up to somewhere around your head, is utterly transmogrified, pours back into the audience, and their pupils grow even wider. And they send even more energy at you. For 70 minutes, you are an empty pipe with what Pete Townsend called the Godhead and the souls of 70,000 people coursing through you. And again, you feel as if you're danced like a marionette on stage. You are not making conscious decisions. You are outside of yourself. And I'm going to find those gods inside of you that danced you like a marionette on stage. And if you're willing, and I will insist on coming out to wherever you are, the environment that reflects you best, and spending a day with you with no handlers, no wives, no assistants, no intercessors of any kind. It's just you and me, because I am going to find the gods inside of you. And if you are willing to undergo that process, then I will work with you. So those are the terms on which I did my work. Now, they don't sound very scientific, but I was using my science and my intuition and the gods inside of me all at once, which is, I believe, one of the obligations of a scientist, in fact.
I was just thinking about, you talk about the gods inside, made me think of Jimi Hendrix and the gods made love. It's like, God's like, come on, let me out.
Yes, exactly. So with Prince, here I was told that he could not do interviews. He would try to strangle an interviewer, and I was demanding a day with him in his environment. So they flew me up to, of all places, Buffalo, New York, which is my hometown, not Prince's, but that's where he was rehearsing in the Shea Theater for the Dirty Minds tour. And I sat in the empty seats in the audience, waiting for them to finish a rehearsal, he and the band. And then Prince and I went backstage, and we found a room where we could lock the door and be alone. And we locked the door, and I interviewed him from 2 in the morning until 9 o'clock in the morning. And it turned out everybody was wrong. Prince could do interviews. So I found his passion points, his imprinting points, which is the key to finding the gods inside of somebody. When he was 5 years old, his mom had taken him to see one of his dad's rehearsals. His dad was a jazz pianist. So he'd gone to an empty theater, very much like the Shea Theater, and all the seats were pointed at the center of the stage, and the lights were all pointed at the center of the stage, and in the center of the stage was his dad, surrounded by, he says, 5 of the most beautiful women he had ever seen in his life. And that was it. Music was going to be his future, thanks to that moment. And then he had another imprinting point when he was a teenager. He was about 5'2". He's the tiniest little thing you can imagine. I didn't realize that for the first 5 years I was working with him, because his personality was so big. It totally, you had the impression he was a giant, not that he was teensy. But other kids must have given him a very hard time in school. because he was so small. So he created his own alternative society. He had a friend, Andre Simone, who later ended up in his band. And Andre Simone's mother had an empty basement she wasn't doing anything with. So Prince created a society based very much, well, I had dropped out of school at one point. I dropped out of college, and I accidentally helped found the hippie movement. That's what's in my book, How I Accidentally Started the 60s. Well, Prince had taken the hippie slogan, make love, not war, and he'd created an entire society around it where sexual freedom was the norm, was what was admired. So these were Prince's two imprinting points, and I went back to New York City with my notes. I organized the key points in chronological order, so they told a smooth story, but they told the genuine story of the gods inside of Prince, their origins, their passion points. And I sent it back to Prince, and I said, look, here's the story of the you that makes your music. We're going to set up 8 interviews a day, 3 days in a row for you in New York, and we're going to do it all over again in LA. And I want you to tell this whole story to each journalist. No matter what the question is, I want you to answer with this story, because the journalist is a megaphone. He's a tool to reach your audience, and your audience needs to know this about who you are. One of the things I preached was, you don't just owe your audience your songs, you owe your audience your life. And I, frankly, Mike, did not know what that meant. All I knew was that it was true. It took me 20 years. It took me 20 years of processing to realize what it meant. And what it meant is that if we succeed in what we're trying to do, you will be the tongue of a group. You will be the speaking organ for an entire group. You will speak on their behalf when they thought they were crazy and alone. You will let them know that they are not alone. They're a movement. There are thousands of them. There are hundreds of thousands of them. There are even hundreds of millions of them in the case of Prince and Michael Jackson. And you are their voice. And that means that they're going to take your posters, they're going to put them up on their walls when they're 13 years old, and they're going to grow up on you the way a tomato grows on a trellis. You know what a trellis is for a tomato?
I've never heard that term, to be honest with you, but go ahead.
Right. Well, it's this vertical framework, and the tomato vine is not strong enough to stand up, so it would leave all of its tomatoes on the ground. But if you put a vertical framework next to the tomatoes, and you pin the tomatoes to the trellis, to the framework, they will grow upward, and the tomatoes will not end up rotting on the ground. And so kids will grow on you as if you are that framework, as if you are that trellis. You will be their role model, which is why you owe your audience not just your songs, you owe your audience your life.
Wow.
So Prince was extremely good. I mean, I explained to him how interviews would go, how they would feel, and how you had to, when a new interview came into the room, you can't say, well, as I just said to the previous interviewer, you cannot apologize for repeating yourself. You repeat yourself on stage every night with your greatest songs, and you do them as if you've never done them before in your life. With all the gusto that you can manage, you have to do the same thing with a journalist. And Prince took to this education so well that when he came up with his first protege, Vanity, he had me fly out to Minneapolis and give her the interview training, get her story out of her, organize it in chronological order so it told a story, get it back to her, and train her on how to deal with journalists. And then he came up with another set of proteges, The Time, with Morris Day. Well, at that point, I had a really serious back problem, and I was stuck in my bed and was doing all my work naked from under the sheets with one of those trays that juts out over you that they use in hospitals, jutting out over me with my telephone and a couple of Rolodexes. Mm-hmm. And I got a call from California saying, well, Prince needs you to do what you do with another one of his acts. And I said, Janie, I can't do it. I'm laying here naked in a bed working. And she said, okay, tell me your address. We'll be there at 11:30 tomorrow morning. Well, I had kept the details of my apartment top secret. I dressed in a way that allowed me to be with a record company president on zero notice any day of the week. So I dressed extremely well, although somewhat uniquely. But my house was a mess. My wife and I were saving all of our money and living like college students, which meant that all of our furniture had been dragged in off the street. At one time or another, we'd had 80 different cats and 3 dogs.
Wow.
The cats had clawed all of the covering off of the furniture, so the chairs were bare springs on a wooden frame. And my wife threw a sheet over one of these chairs, former chairs. And at 11:30 the next morning, a limousine came cruising down my block. My block was a slum in those days. Today, it's one of the wealthiest blocks in the world, literally. But not in those days. So my neighbors must have been shocked that there was a limo coming down the street and stopping at my house. And out of one side jumped this gorgeous blonde person, Jamie Shoup, who worked for the management company. And out of the other door came Morris Day in a zoot suit, as well pressed as if he had had somebody with an iron sitting there next to him in the limousine the whole time, making sure that all of his creases were sharp. They came up three stairs with dust bunnies the size of dinosaurs.
What time is it?
Yes. And they knocked on the door, and my wife opened it. And when Morris Day walked in, one of our dogs goosed him from the front. One of our dogs goosed him from the rear. This is the dog way of a friendly greeting, checking you out, asking how you are. Morris, unfortunately, is human and probably didn't take it that way. He was guided into my bedroom. He had to sit on this chair that was all springs and a wooden frame with just a sheet thrown over the springs for the next 5 hours while I got the story of his life out of him. And Prince made me do it over and over and over again with each of his proteges, right up to Kristen Scott Thomas, who's, I don't know if you've seen her. She had an Academy Award nomination for The English Patient. She had another Academy Award nomination for The Horse Whisperer. She's a brilliant actress. So Prince turned out not at all to be what Warner Brothers had told me he was. Now, he was afraid of men. And he was probably afraid of men because other men had beaten him up all his life, and he was only comfortable with beautiful women. Mm-hmm. Of course, you and I would also be comfortable with beautiful women if they would throng around us. They did throng around Prince. So on the third year, the second year I went out to Minneapolis to see him to catch up on how he had developed, because you change with age. You know, you go, life is very strange. You go through these massive metamorphoses, as radical as the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. So you change from a baby into a toddler into a child into a teenager into an adult into a middle-aged person. You just keep going through changes. So I went back every year to check up on Prince and find out what the latest story was on his next album and who he had become. And that worked for the first year, but so it was my second year with Prince. And then the third year when I went out to Minneapolis, Prince refused to see me. He was afraid of me. He said that I was a member of the press, which I wasn't. And he shouldn't have been afraid of the members of the press. But his innate fear of males took over. So that made Prince a little bit strange. But he was a workaholic. His only real two satisfactions in life were his music and sex. And so that meant he made music every day. Now, when you're an early artist and nobody knows who you are, you can put out two albums a year. Once people really know who you are, you can only put out one album a year. Then once you become a superstar, you have to keep it down to one album every 2 years. So it's a big event. Well, Prince was making music every single day. What was he going to do with all of this music? Well, he started puppet bands like Vanity 6. Starring Vanity, who was one of the most gorgeous women I've ever known. She was adorable. And with Morris Day and The Time and other, Wendy and Lisa wrote their own music. But so Prince used all these puppet bands to get his music out. And the fact that he was working when he died, he was in his studio. He had gone into the elevator in his studio, and that's where he died, in the elevator, at work, not knowing that this fentanyl was about to kill him. And Wendy and Lisa, who are friends of mine, miss him. I miss him. It's like having a chunk of your life torn out. Because in order to look, this is what used to happen. I used to get a call from Bob Cavallo, Prince's manager, after Prince went into hiding, after I was no longer able to talk to him. And Cavallo would say, "Look, I haven't seen the kid for a year. And I've got the lyrics to his next album. You're not supposed to know that I have the lyrics to his next album. You're not supposed to see the lyrics to his next album. But if I send you, no, he didn't say it that way. He said, but if the lyrics to his next album appear on your desk at 10:30 tomorrow morning, can you tell me what Prince is thinking? And the answer was always yes, because Herman Hesse said, there's a little closet with 10,000 personalities that could have been you, hidden dark in the depths of yourself. And my job with somebody like Prince was to find the personality hidden in that dark closet that corresponded to Prince. And that self inside of me that was Prince grew, changed as time went on, and somehow remained synchronized with Prince with only the tiniest bits of evidence. So the answer was yes, I can tell you what Prince is thinking. And I did. And I did that over and over again because my empathic centers were tuned to Prince. And that was part of the secret of secular shamanism, too. I had to find not only the gods inside of you, I had to find those gods inside of me so I could stay in touch with who you were.
And that's amazing. You can have up to 10,000 personalities in a person. That's amazing. I only have a few, to be honest with you. I've got, 99,997 to go, and maybe
if you were a novelist, like a fan of mine, one fan of mine was Leon Uris, the novelist. Well, you sit down at your typewriter, and over the course of writing a book, 40 different people who never existed before come marching out of you. And those people are so strong in their individual identities that you can wake up in the morning and go to your typewriter convinced of what you're going to do next. And these characters that you've created or have marched out of you can take over and say, no, that's not where we're going at all, and take you in a totally unexpected direction. That's how powerful those hidden personalities inside of you are. When I just did a live podcast or a live bookcast with Harry Hamlin, the actor, and he was, and I was wondering if he went through the same kind of performance ecstasies that I was talking about with my musicians. I mean, I've gone through that once. Once I was 16 years old. The other kids in my school did not like me at all, but they kept electing me the chair of something called the program committee. Well, we had 5 student assemblies a week, one before every single school day.
Wow. That is
those. And I programmed 2 of them. And one day the juniors came to me and they said, we're having a dance. Could you advertise it? They didn't realize the irony of what they were saying. If there was a party of any kind, especially a dance in Buffalo, New York, I was invited to stay as far away as it's humanly possible, preferably Cleveland or Phoenix, Arizona. And yet they wanted me to advertise their dance, at which I would be highly unwelcome. So I put a record on the turntable. I can't dance. I can't do the box step. I can't do the foxtrot. I can't do the waltz. I went on stage and I started wiggling, wriggling, jumping, doing all kinds of things you'd never seen before and that I had never seen before. And something strange happened. These 350 kids in the audience did not like me. And I saw the faces of the audience melting. I saw their eyes widening. I saw their pupils dilating. I kept an eye in particular on the girl who hated me the most. And she was melting like a candle. And I saw their energy come together into that amoebic blob. And I saw that energy coursing through me, and I had an out-of-body experience. I was on the ceiling watching this whole thing take place. And the energy went up to somewhere around my head, was utterly transmogrified, went back down to the audience, widened their eyes even further, and that energy came back through me again. It was an astonishing experience, and I was danced like a marionette, like a puppet on that stage. And something really weird happened, Mike, at the end of that performance. The audience did something it had never done before in its life. It would never do again, but it did it as if it had been practicing it forever. It surged down to the foot of the stage. They picked me up on their shoulders. They carried me out of the auditorium, and they carried me all the way up the walkway to the building where we had our classes, and only then did they put me down. So you've heard of things like this happening. They're for real. They're not just figures of speech. Of course, it's the only time it's happened to me in my life. But that was one of the experiences that allowed me to understand my performers. Now, Harry Hamlin and I work together in the National Space Society. We're putting together a fundraising dinner that will take place in 2021, in May of 2021. And I admire Harry tremendously. And he used to be in LA law, and then he was in Perseus in some movie about the gods, and he's won at least a dozen major awards. He's played Hamlet, all kinds of things. And so Harry was with me on this bookcast, and it turns out he indeed has had the kind of ecstatic experience that I'm talking about. And in his case, because when you're acting, you have to look at the other character you're talking to. You can't look at the audience. So I was wondering how he picks up on whether the audience is melting to him. And he said, and this should have occurred to me, he can hear them breathe.
Really?
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, yeah, well, now an X-rated fact here. When I became a cyber personality in 1988 to 1992 or so, because it was the only option left to me, was to reinvent myself online, I became a cyber Lothario. And when you're making love to a woman online, digitally, you can feel whether what you're saying is having an impact or not by listening to her. Whether you know it or not, you're listening to her breath. So I understood exactly what Harry was talking about. Now think of this. When Harry is playing a lawyer on L.A. Law, one personality comes out of him. When he's playing the god Perseus in the film, another god comes out of him. When he is playing the kid in Equus, yet another personality has to come out of him. And his favorite role, and the one that created the greatest ecstatic experience for him, was playing Hamlet. And there, yet another personality comes out of him. How many roles has Harry had? Well, if we look it up on IMDb, he's probably had about 50 roles. That's 50 different personalities he has to find in that dark little closet of Hermann Hesse and bring to the surface in order to play those parts. And if Harry has all of those personalities in him, you have those personalities in you. And I have them in me too. So one day, Bob Cavallo, Prince's manager, and I were about to go into a restaurant, and I was telling him why it was a mistake to change the structure of his office, because he was about to get it redesigned, and I thought it was a big mistake. And when we got into the foyer, in a little space between the outer door and the inner door, and his jaw was dropping. And he said, "Do you always do this? Meaning, do you always telepath people?" Well, yes. Sometimes I'm able to do that. Why? Not because there are any weird psychic powers, not because there are any weird, strange energies I'm tapped into. It's by finding that personality in myself that corresponds to the person that I'm talking with. So you too can do mine if you're able to tap those 10,000 personalities.
Wow, I think we've got a ways to go. I don't think I've hit Harry Hamlin as of yet. I'm going to have to do as a homework assignment to figure out the rest of the 10,000 personalities. And just another thing, too, what else do we don't know about Prince?
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, Prince, nymphomania, right? Uh-huh. It's a woman who just is hungry for sex. Well, there's a corresponding condition in men called satyriasis. And Prince was hungry for sex. I mean, one of the reasons John Mellencamp will explain to you. John Mellencamp says, why else would people go into rock and roll? He means except for the sex. And so I had a very pretty account executive that I assigned to Prince, and she spent a lot of time with Prince. And one day I got a call from Prince's managers, and they said, would you mind if Prince had sex with your account executive? I'm not sure they used those exact words, but I said, no, we do not do that, period. And Prince honored that. Because Prince could have so many women, and the women who came to him were so amazingly pretty, I used to go out to the West Coast and work 2 days a week in L.A. and 5 days a week in New York, because I was working for Lionel Richie. He had fired his manager, which is a big mistake. His manager was brilliant, and he had hired me to be his interim manager until he found a real manager. So I had to spend 2 days a week out in Lionel Richie's kitchen or Lionel Richie's living room with my laptop.
Wow.
And when I was out there, I used to get calls from Sheila E. Now, Sheila E. is an amazing percussionist, and she's an artist in her own right. She has a career. She was one of the members of Santana. Carlos Santana's band was her father. She grew up in music. And Sheila would call me crying. And she was crying because she wanted to marry Prince. She wanted to have his babies. She wanted to be the only woman the prince was sleeping with. And I had to explain to her over and over again that's never going to happen because Prince has access to so many women. And so this is not something that you can pin your hopes on. But she couldn't help it. She was in love with Prince. And, when you're in love with somebody, you're a whole different creature. And you're far more fragile. And you feel that... Yeah, you have a different personality. Exactly. So those are the things about Prince. And then there's the story of Under the Cherry Moon. So I got a call from Bob Cavallo one day, and Prince's manager. And he said, you've got to be out here at tomorrow morning. We're showing the new film. I've been in the editing room for 3 months now, and I haven't been able to turn this into a film. So I flew out to California the next morning, and since I was about to see a film, I don't normally watch films on planes. I normally work. I have my laptop with me. But I took time out to watch a film. Why? I wasn't quite sure, Mike. A lot of times you do something that's real and you know it's right, but you don't know why it's right. Your intuition is guiding you. It was because I needed to set a standard. And this film that I was about to see was absolutely perfect. It had Richard Dreyfuss and Susan Sarandon. It was about a whole market that nobody had ever expressed the emotions of, single white women raising their children all by themselves. That was a brand new thing in the 1980s. So on paper, it was the perfect film. Richard Dreyfuss is adorable. Susan Sarandon is wonderful. And the film utterly failed. And I realized that in a good film, you don't want anybody to see you when the film is over because you're distraught. There's a tear in the corner of your eye. Your voice is all choked up. And you try to walk out of the theater as invisibly as possible without a single person seeing your face because it's a mess. So I realized that I was going to have to watch Prince's film with the tear in the corner of the eye meter and the lump in the throat meter. So it was the biggest screening room I'd ever seen. I've seen screening rooms as small as 8 people. Generally, a screening room is about 40 people. This is 150 people. Wow. And Bob Cavallo wanted me to sit next to him. And I refused because if I was sitting next to Bob Cavallo, again, I would have been really self-conscious about how he saw me. I would be trying to look cool, and I wouldn't be able to melt. I wouldn't be able to have the lump in the throat and the tear in the corner of my eye. So I went way to the back of my room, rows of seats beyond or away from anybody else, and watched this movie. It was Purple Rain, and it hit me like a punch in the gut. This film did things to my emotions, inexpressible, nonverbal things to my emotions that were just beyond belief. And it was a powerful, powerful film. I was amazed by it. And then we and the Warner Brothers people all filed into the conference room next door. And the conference room next door, well, it's very important where you position yourself in a meeting. And the spot opposite the door is the power seat. Now, most doors are at the head of the conference table or the foot of the conference table. But this door was in the middle of the conference table. So when I took a position opposite the door, I was in the middle of the table looking as anonymous as could be, but I had the power seat and nobody knew it. So the heads of the table sat at their end. The official film publicist, because you have to have a publicist that is registered with some guild or other, they sat at the foot of the table, and they were the first people to be called on. And they looked as if their cat had just died. And their bunnies had all been boiled. They were in terrible shape. And when they opened their mouths, it wasn't what they said that counted. It was this demeanor that basically said, this film is terrible. And then a Warner Brothers person spoke, and he said, well, we're going to open this film in 6 theaters in Arizona. Well, I'd been kidnapped into the film industry in 1973 by Frank Yablans, the president of Paramount Pictures. So I've been involved with film for a while, and that is a death sentence. That is the company's way of saying we're canning your film. So they got to me, and I stood up and I said, if you destroy this film, you are destroying a part of film history. Once upon a time, singers were puppets. Singers sang songs created in Tin Pan Alley. Their sound was produced by magical miracle men behind the scene who manipulated everything they did and dictated their haircuts and what they wore and where they sat in a movie theater. Fabian once got into a fight with his Svengali over where he sat in a movie theater. They had a fist fight over it because the Svengali, the idol maker as he called himself, was very specific about where Fabian should sit, and Fabian wasn't following the rules.
Oh,
and then
no.
then in 1964, you had a group that was successfully making pop songs, but they were doing something highly unusual. They were writing the songs themselves. Their names were the Beatles. And that utterly transformed the way music was made and the authenticity of music, because from now on, the person on stage was usually the person writing all the music. So what they were singing was a personal statement that came from the gut. And there were no more New Moon, June, and Spoon cliches. The songs became much more meaningful. And I explained that this film was doing for film what the Beatles had done for music. It was the first musician writing and, for all practical purposes, directing and making from the gut his own film, and it was one of the most powerful personal statements you have ever seen in your life. And that speech helped save Purple Rain from going into the can. I mean, then Bob Cavallo, who is a magician, he has an astonishing ability to take impossibilities and turn them into everyday realities, got Warner's to release the film in 100 theaters in conjunction with this new thing that I had been an advisor on called MTV. And the result was that Purple Rain was a tremendous success. And when I got out of my 15 years in bed, I was afraid that people would have forgotten Michael Jackson and Prince. And I went to the cafe where I began to write all my next books. And I ran into an 18-year-old, and I said, "Have you ever heard of Prince?" And he went, his face dropped with awe. And I said, "Have you ever heard of a film named Purple Rain?" He said, "Yeah, man, that's the ultimate make-out film of all time." Well, Mike, what was he telling me? Our society has rituals for major transitions in life. For the transition from teenagehood, or rather from childhood to teenagehood, we have bar mitzvahs, and we have, I forget what they're called in the Catholic Church, confirmations.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And for girls, we have Sweet 16 parties. And then when you get married, we have a big wedding ceremony. And when you die, we have another big ceremony, the funeral. But one of the most awkward transitions in life for men is the transition at 12 and a half to 13 years old from childhood to full sexuality. And no ritual validates that transition. And what this kid was telling me is that Prince's movie had become a ritual that validated that transition. You could take your girlfriend there, and on your first date, you are terribly self-conscious, and your arm is next to her arm, and you wonder if you dare lift your arm to put it around her shoulder, and if you dare beyond that to take her shoulder, and then if you dare fumble with her in more awkward ways that are not good for PG-rated. These rules have already broken several times in this conversation. But at any rate, and there's nothing to guide you through that. And if Prince's movie will help get you through that, that is as important as weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs, or confirmation ceremonies. So it turned out that people still not just loved Michael Jackson, they felt him in their gut on a level they could not articulate. But he was of profound importance to people, and so was Prince. So it was very gratifying after 15 years, like Rip Van Winkle, in a bedroom, to discover that the artists that I had poured so much of my gods inside, so much of my hidden closet of personalities into, were alive and well. And that would have been 2003.
Wow, that is amazing. We'll talk about Michael Jackson in just a minute, but first listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Looking for a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@SonicWebStudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, and over 25 podcast platforms. Take The Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to The Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel and follow The Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author and world-renowned publicist Howard Bloom here on the Mike Wagner Show, talking about his book, Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me. And yes, we'll get to Michael Jackson. And tell us all about Michael Jackson. What was it really like for you?
Well, remember, the subtitle of the book is A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll.
That's true, yes.
And remember what gave me my first creed when I was 10 years old, my first religion, the 2 rules of science, the truth at any price, including the price of your life, and look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. And Michael Jackson was the living incarnation of those first 2 rules of science. My first meeting with Michael, I was out in California at Marlon Jackson's pool house. A pool house is a little building just big enough for 1 room on the first floor and 1 room on the second floor. And the brothers and I were in the room on the first floor, and we were surrounded by arcade video games up against the wall, which, of course, nobody in those days could afford. I don't think anybody can afford them these days. And a pool table in the center of the room. And we were looking at tour jackets, and we were looking at T-shirts, and I was trying to explain, you try to put on the most astonishing show in the world. Your tour jackets have to be astonishing. Your T-shirts have to be astonishing. And then I heard the door open, the screen door. And I knew that it was Michael. So, and I didn't grow up with other kids, Mike. I grew up in isolation with lab rats and guinea pigs. That's what was in my bedroom, and guppies. And so I didn't know normal human rituals. But when I was 19, somebody had taught me that if there's somebody who others want you to meet, you walk up to them, you put out your hand, you say, "Hi, my name is fill in the blank." And they will reach out their hand and say, "Hi, my name is fill in the blank." So I had never done this before, but I had read 1,000 articles on Michael, a stack this high of articles on Michael. And they all said Michael Jackson is a bubble baby. So if you reach out your hand to touch him, he will shrink away in fear. So Michael was coming through the screen door. He hadn't gotten through the door yet. I reached my hand out. I said, "Hi, I'm Howard," for the first time in my life. And Michael reached his hand out and said, "Hi, I'm Michael." And it was a normal human using a normal voice, a little bit softer than most. The handshake was not a handshake designed to assert dominance. He wasn't trying to crush my hand and show me how powerful he was. It was a normal, just a little bit softer than most. And I said, "Michael, I've got a press release to read you. I need your upstairs." We went up the very small flight of stairs, and the second floor room was heaped to the ceiling with amplifiers and keyboards. And Michael found an amplifier to sit on, and I found an amplifier to sit on. And I read the first 2 sentences of the press release, and Michael went, "Oh," and slumped a little bit in his seat. And I read him the next 2 sentences of the press release, and he went, "Oh," and he slumped even further in his seat. And by the time we finished with the press release, he was slumped all the way back.
Oh, my.
And he said, "Man, that was beautiful. Did you write that?" And I had written it. And what nobody else ever realized in the business is I had started to take writing very seriously when I was 12 years old. I had gotten hooked on a style book that's one of the classics, Strunk on Style. When I was 16 years old, I had edited the literary magazine at NYU when I was God knows what age, and we'd won 2 National Academy of Poets prizes. The poet in residence at NYU thought I would be the next great poet to come out of NYU. My writing was serious business. And by serious business, I mean it was art, even in a press release. But the only person who ever saw that, Mike, the only person was Michael Jackson. He saw the art in every sentence. Then we went downstairs because we had an appointment with the art director from CBS. So she came in carrying 5 of the most gorgeous portfolios you've ever seen in your life. They were hand-tooled cherry wood, hand-tooled leather, and they were the gods of the illustration business. I knew that because I had gotten into pop culture by creating an art studio and making it on the cover of Art Direction magazine. So she slid the first portfolio across the table at us. It was by Michael Whalen, who's an absolutely astonishing artist. And Michael was standing on my right side. His left elbow was up against my right elbow. His left shoulder was up against my right shoulder. His left knee was up against my right knee. And the brothers were crowded around us, pressing us together. And Michael opened the first square inch of the first page of that portfolio. And again, his knees buckled a little bit. And he went, oh, 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 oh. Michael Jackson was having an aesthetic orgasm, something I had never seen before in my life, and I have never seen since. And you could feel in the body language, in those sounds he was making, that Michael saw more in that first inch of painting than anyone ever sees. You know, there's this poem by William Blake about seeing the infinite in the tiniest of things. Michael was seeing the infinite in the tiniest of things, and he was seeing things in that illustration that even Michael Whalen, the artist, had never seen.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now, Michael felt that since he was given this quality of awe, wonder, surprise, curiosity, that it was his obligation. God had given this to him as a gift, and it was his obligation to give that to his kids. And I saw his utter commitment, his truth at any price style commitment, when I got a call one day. I kept a little red $19.95 nylon knapsack behind my desk. And it contained a razor, a toothbrush, a spare shirt, and my TRS-100, the first laptop computer. And it was there because I used to get calls on emergencies and have to go somewhere on no notice. Well, I got a call from California saying, you have to be out here at 11 o'clock tonight. Michael is canceling his tour. You're the only person he will listen to. So I flew out to LA, took my rental car to the address that I'd been given, discovered it was the middle of a great big studio lot. A studio lot is these giant aircraft hangar-sized buildings, huge. And all of them were dark, and it's a darkness that swallows your very soul. It puts gloom into your heart. And only one of the buildings was lit, and despite all the lighting, it was as if the lighting wasn't penetrating the darkness. And I went inside, and there was a 110-foot stage in front of me with the Jacksons on it. Now, to give you an idea of the size of a 110-foot stage, I had been named by the mayor of Houston, Texas, the ambassador of Texas culture to the world, because ZZ Top was putting together a tour they called Taking Texas to the World. And it had a stage in the shape of the state of Texas, tilted at an angle so you could see its shape. And that stage, which was supposed to be monolithic, was 75 feet. 110 feet is roughly 60% larger than ZZ Top's stage. So I waited for the brothers to finish their rehearsal, and we all trailed out to this little trailer. You've seen dressing trailers, so it was a dressing room built into a trailer, and it had two banquettes of seats opposite each other, and then another banquette, catty corner, at the next to the door, and that was the throne. So Michael took the throne. The brothers surrounded us. I went immediately to his left hand, his non-threatening side. Again, positioning is important if you want to have an influence. And Michael started explaining things to me. Now, look, the tour had been getting terrible publicity. A guy named Dave Marsh is one of the lead sheep in the press. Anything he says, the rest of the press will imitate all over the country and all around the world. And he was saying, we know everybody in the business, we meaning something called the rock crit elite, something that Bob Christgau, one of the critics, named. It's a little elite of rock critics. And he said, we know everybody in the business, and nobody we know has been hired to build the stage. Nobody that we know has been hired to do the sound. Nobody that we know has been hired to do the lighting. Nobody that we know has been hired to do the security. So this tour is going to be amateur, Bill. And the result is the stage is going to collapse. The electricians or the musicians are going to be killed by the electrical system, by their microphones. The lighting, which is 5 stories high, is going to collapse on the audience and kill people. And because the security is going to be amateur, there are going to be gangs running up and down the aisles, slicing people, and you won't dare take your children to this concert. So I didn't know why the tour was so susceptible to this bad press, even though I was working with all my might to stop it. And Michael all of a sudden explained to me why the tour was susceptible to such bad publicity. He said, a year and a half ago, I found the best staging people, I found the best sound people, I found the best lighting people, and I found the best magicians and special effects people. and I made every single one of them sign a non-disclosure agreement. In other words, he signed these people to secrecy. So he did have the best people working for him. Why had he signed them to secrecy? Because he wanted to utterly surprise his audience. He wanted to give them the gift of that awe, wonder, and surprise that he got from the tiniest of things. So, and he went on to explain that my brother Jackie is the best dancer in the world. The best dancer in the world? Think of who is saying this. Michael Jackson has studied every dancer from James Brown to Fred Astaire. He knows he is the best dancer in the world himself. He knows his dancers. If he says his brother Jackie is the best dancer he's ever seen, he's not kidding around. That is a major expert statement. And he said, my brother Jackie has come down with a bone chip in his knee. Well, I knew that because I had arranged the press conference with the surgeons after the operation. And he said, my brother Jackie was supposed to be ready in time for the tour, and he's not. So I'm going to push the tour back and start it when my brother Jackie is able to dance with us, because I can't give my audience any less than the most amazing possible. And I had a vision, Mike. It was the first and only visual vision I've ever had in my life. I saw Michael's ribs as golden gates. I saw those golden gates open, and I saw Michael's 10,000 kids inside of them, and I saw his absolute commitment to those kids. For him, this was the truth at any price, including the price of your life. But I believe in the truth at any price, including the price of your life, too. And I said, Michael, your tour already is getting horrible. If you put this tour back, if you postpone it, it's going to ratify, it's going to seem like truth, everything that people like Dave Marsh have been saying. And parents are not going to allow their kids to go to these concerts, much less take their kids to these concerts. And Michael, and it was like two prophets going up against each other, because when I see a truth, it comes out of me in a way you wouldn't believe. And when Michael sees the truth, obviously it comes out of him in a way you wouldn't believe. And if this was a contest, I won. But it wasn't a contest. It was a synergy. We were working together to get the best possible result. So Michael said yes to doing his tour on time without Jackie. And so that is the truth at any price, including the price of your life. Come alive in front of your very eyes. So Michael was a kind of human I never expected to see on planet Earth. I had no conception that such a person could possibly exist, because Prince was on the scale of normal. John Mellencamp was on the scale of normal. Billy Joel was on the scale of normal. Michael was off the scale of normal completely. So completely that it seemed as if he were an angel or a saint. It was the most remarkable thing I'd ever seen in my life, and it's a little story. Once upon a time in 1954, all the physiologists said it was impossible to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. And then a guy named Roger Bannister, a medical student in Britain, and another medical student friend of his started analyzing every move he made when he was running and cutting out all the moves that wasted energy. And Roger Bannister ran the mile in less than 4 minutes. All of a sudden, the impossible became possible. And if you look up the 4-minute mile on Wikipedia, it will tell you that every world-class professional runner now automatically runs a 4-minute mile. 1,800 people have run the 4-minute mile since then. Well, in the same way that Roger Bannister established a new possibility for humankind with the 4-minute mile, Michael Jackson created a standard of awe, wonder, surprise, and commitment so much higher than anything we've ever seen on this planet, that it sets a bar the way Roger Bannister sets a bar. And if other kids grow up knowing what Michael Jackson really was, they will aspire to that level of awe, wonder, and surprise, and it will expand the realm of human possibility. It will expand the envelope of human perception. So I'm trying to tell you who Michael really was in this book, because it's important that you know, and it's important that your kids and your grandkids know who Michael really was, so they can go beyond any level of surprise, awe, and wonder that we've ever seen on planet Earth before.
That is amazing. I'd like to talk to you more about it as well, too. Next time, we'll talk more about the books and talk about some of the other artists as well, too. Once again, author and world-renowned publicist Howard Balloon, The Mike Wagner Show with Einstein, Michael Jackson and Me, A Search for Soul and Power in the Pits of Rock and Roll, published by Roman and Littlefield, available on Amazon. Love to have back on again soon, of course. I love to have dinner with you as well, too, Howard. And also tell us what to expect from you in 2020 and beyond.
Well, I'm going to concentrate on promoting this book right now. There's the film, Dinner with My Dinner. There's already a film coming out, or that's come out and has done the festival circuit and has won an award. That film will come out on July 25th. It's called The Grand Unified Theory of Howard Bloom. And then there's another movie called My Dinner with Howard, and God knows when that will be finished, probably the fall. So that's coming out. And then I have 2 more books to write, but I can't get started on those until I've brought you all I can about Einstein, Michael Jackson, and me, because of all things, I mean, I've written books that have set whole new boundaries in science, but this book may be the most important book I've ever written.
Mm-hmm. And it's fantastic, too. Looking forward to having you again soon, Howard. A big thank you for your time. You've just been fantastic. Learned a lot from you, man. And do us a favor, keep yourself up to date. Love you. Have back on in 2020 and beyond. You've been beyond fantastic, and I'm going to go discover my 10,000 personalities. Thanks to you.
Thanks, Mike. Good night.
The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention The Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
Thanks for listening to The Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.